Yes, I just want to say a very few words about the sort of overview of what's going to happen next, as it were, in relation to Living Love and Faith. So I will share my screen. So this is where we left off this morning, what happens next. You heard all about the 40 or so people who were led by the Bishop of Coventry, who produced the resources. We now have a new group of bishops whose job it is to take the Living in Love and Faith resources forward. And imaginatively, that group is called the Next Steps Group. Their tasks are as follows. First and foremost, it is to encourage participation in learning together using the Living in Love and Faith resources across the whole church at all levels. And this is very much an invitation for the people of God to participate together in learning. And of course, we need to do that in a number of ways, and that group has suggested a structure which is now in place of each diocese appointing one or a team of advocates, a team in the case of Sheffield Diocese, who then are further helped by a number of other people, as it were, on the ground. And participation in LLF can take all sorts of different forms. There is no standard template, and I would really encourage you to think flexibly about adapting the Living in Love and Faith resources to different contexts. So it might be in local churches, in small groups, in youth groups, in chaplaincy kind of settings, perhaps several churches deciding to do it together, perhaps across a deanery or across the diocese. So lots of different ways in which people can engage with the resources. But I did say that this was about learning together and contributing to the church's discernment about a way forward. What is emerging as we learn together, listen to each other, and listen to God together? And so this group also has the task of gathering that learning, harvesting it, as it were. There are a couple of ways that we're currently doing this. One is we're inviting everyone who's engaged with the resources with others to complete a survey questionnaire available online. There will be some focus group work across the country a little bit later on in the year, as perhaps some themes emerge that we might want to explore in a little bit more depth about what's emerging. And we're also inviting people to respond creatively. We are, after all, made in the image of a creator and creative God. And so, and some of these subjects are quite profound and are perhaps some of our experiences or insights are better expressed in creative ways. And so we're offering a way of that you might want to submit a piece of music, a poem, a piece of artwork, a prayer, as part of your response to that. And we also hope that groups will give us a snapshot, maybe a literal snapshot of your group, but perhaps some highlights of what your group learned together. So a lot of harvesting of what is emerging as people engage with the resources together. And also reflecting on what's emerging in terms of our understanding of what it means to be church, with our diversity and difference. And then, of course, eventually that group will need to begin to gather this and help the church, help the bishops, and of course, members of General Synod to think about where does this then take the church. The whole of this year is set apart for participating in this learning together, and we'll be gathering feedback, what's emerging, right up to the beginning of next year. So it's not too late if you're only feeding back, let's say, in January next year. And then much of next year will be about gathering that feedback, feeding it back to you, making sure that we're reflecting back what it is that we've heard, and with that, beginning to discern what God is saying in relation to a way forward for the church together. And I guess I would just briefly want to say that one of the quite challenging disciplines of this whole process has been sort of stopping ourselves from thinking too much about what are the outcomes of this, but staying with the learning, staying with the listening, staying with one another as we explore this together, rather than blinkering at our learning and the depths and potential for new insights by focusing on what the outcomes might be. So once again, it is about your participation in contributing to the church's discernment of what it is that the Spirit is saying to the church today. So over to wonderful Sheffield advocates.
You go, Ian.
Hello, everyone. So there are four of us, and we're going to do a kind of little introduction to us. But I've asked Rob, really just off the hoof, to say a little bit about the timeline as it might apply in our diocese. So you've heard about that bigger national picture. This is a little bit about the more local picture.
Thanks. I guess the first thing to say is to commend these pastoral principles to start with. I thought the video with Bishop Nick Chamberlain and Ed Shaw this morning was really helpful. And not least, for instance, if vegetarianism is a big problem in your church, that would be a great thing to start with. But there's some great things in there. I think probably to start with that, it would be a good thing really to do straight away. Then probably the next stage then is to prepare by having conversations with the area deans within your mission partnerships and other groups and networks about what you think is possible. As Eva's already said, there's a wealth of resources. There is the course, but there are other ways of engaging with resources, and hopefully as we progress in the next 2 or 3 months, there'll be particular ways and modes of being able to do that, and then to be able to feed back through those recognised ways. So those local conversations can take place. I think courses probably will tend to focus towards in the autumn. And certainly I think the diocese will be, I say diocese, and probably that's Bishop Pete and others in particular, really getting those going in the autumn, perhaps through deaneries and other ways, and in churches as well. So that will take place, I guess it's between sort of September and November, maybe a little bit later. And then that will begin to feed into the national process that Eva's already outlined as well. By all means, use us as advocates throughout that process. We're not sort of experts particularly, or perhaps that's just me I'm speaking about. But what we do have is conversations with both Eva and the other advocates around the country. So we're hearing about how things are going on elsewhere that we can then potentially introduce or give you a bit of an idea about as we go forward throughout the remaining part of this year. So yeah, so there we go. So commend the pastoral principles, prepare by having conversations locally, and then course this autumn using us as help. Ian. So
I'm going to introduce the four of us in a slightly unusual way. I'm going to start with Rob, who you've just seen and heard. So Rob, let me get this right. You're married to a woman, you've got children, you went to an evangelical college to train. So I've got you pigeonholed. I know exactly what you think. Why are you an advocate for LLF?
Yeah, that's right. So you stick me in a box theologically somewhere right of Genghis Khan, and that's not true. But you're right. I'm firmly evangelicals. No question about that. I think as the four of us have discussed this, we've said none of us are neutral when we come to this stuff. We know where we stand on these things. For me personally, I'm not confident in myself, but I am confident in Christ, and I hope that confidence leads me to then respond graciously to others, wanting to hear what others and the way that others have got to the position that they hold as well. And even though we might end up, or might still have deeply profound disagreements with one another, to do so in a way where we're hearing the best of the proposition, the arguments, the stories that other people have, I think is a good thing to help shape us as well, again, as evangelicals, both in understanding what's going on in our institution in the Church of England, but actually to help us think about what's going on in the wider culture as well. So if you like, it helps our, what I call our cultural exegesis. So all sorts of good reasons for I think for me and people like me to get involved. And I hope that means that as we do move towards what takes place next year, that we've done so as graciously as we can do. And so I think that's why I'd like to commend this in the best way possible.
Well, thanks so much. Sibylle.
Can hear a dog in the background, that's not mine.
So Sibylle, I know you're in a civil partnership with a woman. You're a curate in an urban setting in Sheffield. So can I pigeonhole you as well and say, well, why are you getting involved with advocacy for living in love and faith?
Okay, so I'm Sibylle. I'm a curate on the manor in Sheffield. I was priest at the end of September last year. I am, as Ian said, in a civil partnership with a woman. And I think I'm living in love and faith every single day, because this has been my choice and my calling. I work in a church as a priest where the most important human relationship I've got cannot be blessed. I am part of a church where I cannot get married, or I would not be able to function as a priest. And I had to sign up to a document called Issues in Human Sexuality, which says that the relationship I have got, which is faithful and committed and loving, has to be a celibate one. And yet I am here today advocating for living in love and faith, because I think for me that's what it's all about. And yes, I come with a particular standpoint, and yes, you can pigeonhole me, and you will be right probably. But I operate from the principle of nothing about us without us. It is very important that we are that we are at the table when conversations are being held, and that we advocate for those conversations. I feel strong enough and able enough to do that. I bring a certain vulnerability, and I know it will cost me, but I want to offer that to my church because I love it. I believe in the power of conversation as an educational tool, but also to form friendship and form deep bonds. I think it enables us to cross boundaries and to learn from each other. And I think what I've seen in the last few weeks in this group of 4 is that we all come from different backgrounds, from different traditions. I would consider myself very Catholic in my orthodoxy. That's very important to me, which raises issues around gender for me too. But what I've seen in this group is that we can hold space for each other to open up honest conversations that allow us to be safe and brave. And if we can model that in our diocese, then I think we've achieved quite a lot. Yes, I'm hoping for outcomes, and this is not necessarily an outcome-based process, but it will open up conversations that are really important. Yes, I think I'm happy to be in that space.
Sibylle, thank you so much, and for being vulnerable. Third member is Toni-lee Mair. I'm hoping Toni will appear.
Should be there.
She's there. So Toni, now I'm starting to struggle a little bit, because you're married, you're a lay person, you're a licensed reader. I know you're in a solidly Catholic parish because it's only next door to me. I can't pigeonhole you. So why are you involved in this?
First of all, Ian, can I just say, going on from the outbreaks we had this morning in the little groups, I would like to introduce myself as a child of God. That came up on one of the identity, we spoke about identity, and Rachel in our group pointed that out. So yeah, so I am Toni-lee Mair, but I am also a child of God.
Thank you.
Why am I here? Well, as a layperson and a reader, I didn't realise I could say no to the bishop. Nobody told me that. So when I got the email, I thought, ooh. But no, seriously, I've come into this really quite blind. I had heard of it, and then I looked at the book and thought, flipping heck, look at this book. And then the emails came. But having, as Sibylle said, speaking to the three of you and being part of this, I don't want, I had a messy church session about 2 weeks ago, and one of the little girls said to me, she came up with a picture, and it was a statement, not a question, it was a statement, and she said, God loves you more if you have brown hair. And I thought, oh, and I went away and I reflected on that, and as I said, it was a statement, not a question. She wasn't asking me, and I got to thinking that nobody should feel that God loves them less because of who they are or where they're coming from, and neither should that be for anybody walking into any church, should they feel that they are loved less or they're worth less. We're all loved by God, and that is why I'm doing this, because I don't want anybody to feel that they are loved any less or not accepted for who they are. Thank you.
I'm not sure which of my colleagues is going to ask me why I'm here.
Well, Ian, we decided this morning that you represent the sort of the soft middle that doesn't really want to make any decision about anything, and then I think I stopped before I was going to get told off too much. But so Ian, why are you part of the advocate group?
Well, speaking then as a marshmallow Christian, press me and I will give way. I think I've got to the stage in life, and as a Christian, as a child of God, where I'm still learning stuff, and I'm learning most when I'm in dialogue with my sisters and my brothers and their extraordinary stories, because as I listen to their story, what I'm really listening to is the story of God in their life. And that's remarkably privileged. But if I want to hear the true story, I've got to allow them to feel sufficiently safe to be brave and speak. And then hopefully they'll do the same for me. I'm not sure where things will go from this, but if nothing else, I want to be involved in a dialogue that just feels a lot more healthy and grown up and doesn't get stuck in trenches. I thought of that First World War image when on Christmas Day they came out, kicked a football, shared food, cigarettes, looked at one another's photographs, and for a little while realised their common humanity and what they shared. And this is an opportunity to do that. So that's why I'd like to be involved in it. But thanks. I'm going to ask all my colleagues in this a couple of questions in the minutes we've got left. Have you already felt you've learned something that you didn't know earlier? And then what's getting challenging for you? And where still is the hope? What's the hopeful thing? So what you've learned, where you're challenged, and where you're hopeful. Should we do it in reverse and start with you, Toni-lee?
What have I learned? Obviously, I've learned that I need, the requirement to listen, obviously, and you speak about pigeonholing Ian, but you can't pigeonhole anybody, because we don't know anybody's backstory, or we can't make an assumption as to where we sit. And just the small groups I've been in today, aside from the conversations I've had, is actually the gentleman in my group, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying, because he did tell us he was 90. I shan't mention names, but you know, to speak with people of all ages and be hopeful that, you know, going forward that this is going to be so exciting, and say the conversations, and it's across every, you know, age group and gender and wherever we are. So yes, it's I'm really hopeful after today and the conversations.
Thank you so much. Sibylle.
I think what Toni said, I think I've learned to make fewer assumptions, and I've learned about myself that I can make judgments quite quickly and they're not always right. I think I'm more open to just getting to know people's stories and listening to what is said and what's not being said. Yeah, I think not making assumptions is probably the biggest. Just because someone is married and has kids doesn't mean they're not gay. Not everybody who is 90 is straight. There are so many, and I think I can operate within a bubble, but even within a bubble of people of similar mind, there are huge differences. And there are a lot of questions that people don't dare ask. That applies to very inclusive churches too. We assume everybody thinks the same, but we don't. So ask questions of each other and be open to difference.
Thank you. And Rob, your own perhaps learning, your hopes.
Yeah, I'm reminded, I think, how there's always a benefit, isn't there, to hearing someone else's story and just seeing the whole person rather than just a proposition or a straw man that person might represent. So I think, you know, that has been good already so far, even the four of us. I think that's been a helpful understanding. I think as well, certainly in churches like mine, you know, you can start seeing, hearing those stories where we might have been unwelcoming, and I think as you hear things, you think, well, actually there's stuff that I can listen to in a way that we can be inclusive in our welcome for all people in our churches. I think that's already started to get my mind whirring as well. So yeah, and hopefully, again, I think, you know, gracious conversations between people, you know, at a whole variety of different points actually can be enjoyable. And not always to be feared, if you like. So, yeah, thank you.
I think I can be really honest, and to thank Bishop Pete for the invitation to us to be a small group, because we've already begun to really like each other, and be safe enough to share some of the stories and the things that have impacted us over the years, that have helped make us who we are, and where we still struggle. And it's been an enormous privilege, and I'm just hoping that we can sort of have more and more of these small clusters out there, because the benefits are tremendous for our ministry, for our spiritual development, and for our well-being.